Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please be upstanding for the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, the Executive Manager and the Borough Solicitor.
Forgetting about the microphone. The openness of local government bodies regulations 2014 allows filming and recording by anyone attending a meeting. This is not within the council's control. Rushcliffe Borough Council is committed to being open and transparent in its decision making. As such, the council will undertake audio recording of meetings which are open to the public, except where it is resolved that the public be excluded, as the information being discussed is confidential or otherwise exempt. In order to enable the recording, please use the microphones at all times when speaking. Tonight's meeting is being recorded for training purposes only. Can you remember after to switch your microphones off as well? Thank you. I'd like to introduce my chaplain. I think a lot of you know him, Canon Haydock, who will say the opening prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, from whom cometh wisdom and understanding, be present, we humbly beseech thee, with thy servants assembled to deliberate in council upon those things that make for the maintenance, well-being, and extension of this borough, and grant that they, seeking only thine honour and glory, may be guided in all their consultations to perceive the more excellent way, and may have grace and strength to follow the same, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Teach us, good Lord, to serve thee as thou deservest, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labour and not to ask for any reward, save that of knowing that we do thy will, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Would the rest of you like to be seated? I've seen my pen. Yes, please. Thank you. May we begin by asking for apologies for absence, please.
Apologies from Councillor Hetherington, Councillor Adair and Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Cotty?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare a private interest in item 9, number 1, the first motion. Thank you.
Item 3 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 24th of May 2018. Councillor Robinson.
I'd like to move the acceptance of those minutes, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Seconded.
And I would like to second the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Any amendments? Right, all in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Is that unanimous? Thank you very much. Item 4 is my announcements, and I have a very sad duty to tell people that former councillor Hilary Morrissey, the sad news is that former councillor Hilary Morrissey, who represented the East Leek ward from 1995 to 1999, died recently and whose funeral was held earlier today. During her time on the council, Councillor Morrissey served on, amongst other committees, the Planning Committee, the Recreation Committee, the Joint Centres Management Committee, the Kingston Brook Internal Drainage Board. And former Councillor Morrissey also served her local community as a member of East Leek Parish Council. Please join with me while we stand in a minute's silence in her honour. Thank you, councillors. It has been a very busy, delightful start to the civic year. My sincere thanks for the donations that have been made so far towards my charity this year, the Nottinghamshire Hospice. Thank you also for joining me at my civic service. Whilst mentioning the hospice, I have been busy arranging my first fundraiser for the hospice. It will be a lovely meal, a raffle and some items which will be auctioned by Charles Hanson of local and TV fame. Full details will follow, but please note the date of October the 13th. I was very privileged to be able to attend the handout ceremony of the Defence and National Rehabilitation Centre at Stanford Hall. The transformation of the buildings and park to such a worthy cause is wonderful for our area. I was honoured to be able to speak to the Duke of Cambridge and to meet the Duke of Westminster and many of the donors who gave towards the £300 million project. Most recently, I've been helping our officers and Councillor Mason to promote the Tour of Britain bike race, in particular at Abbey Road Primary School and Crockwell Bishop Primary School. The children really welcomed the opportunity to be able to loudly cheer on the cyclists and have been inspired to prepare some very imaginative schemes to brighten the route on Saturday, September the 8th, the 7th stage, which is the penultimate stage, and which starts on Central Avenue in West Bridgford. I've also visited Archbishop Cranmer School at Aslockton, which has celebrated its 50th anniversary. Children always are most pleased but curious to see the mayor and can be quite challenging with their questioning, and each visit can be very different. Of late, the mayor has been ably assisted by cadets, and I'm most delighted to welcome to this meeting the cadet appointed for this year, Luke Witham. And would you please come forward, Luke, to receive your certificate of your appointment? You can put that down now. I ask the leader to make his announcement. Item 5, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just following on from, as you mentioned about Stamford Hall, that I was delighted to attend with the Chief Executive the actual closing of Headley Court. Now, this is the headquarters currently of the Rehabilitation Centre. It was a very moving ceremony. It's been there since about 1948. It was built for the Battle of Britain. So that is now formally closed and the formal baton was handed over. And now Stamford Hall, as the Mayor said now, it will now be the centre ready to take its first patients, hopefully later this year or maybe early next year. Secondly, Madam Mayor, I attended the first LEP meeting. I'm the representative for all the councils in Nottinghamshire, this is the districts, for the LEP, and the first board meeting was last week. This is an incredibly important conduit for finance. So basically all the government finance comes through the LEP. There is a new chairman, a lady called Liz Fagan, who's currently the chief executive of Boots. She took up the mantle as well, literally in the last week or so, taking over from Peter Richardson, who many of you would have met at the civic dinner. There's also going to be a new chief executive, so it really is a very radical change to the LEP. There's a government paper came out only, I think, yesterday, which is going to change structures, accountability and governance as well. So we'll be taking that on board, and obviously I will be reporting back to this full council on progress as we move forward. Thirdly, Madam Mayor, I would just like to congratulate Councillor Barry Cooper as Mayor, who donated 6,974 as his pounds as Mayor to the Friary. So I think a round of applause to Barry for the excellent work. I know they do excellent work, and certainly Barry and Jean as well. Tremendous work, and to all those who supported you there, Barry. It was a fantastic donation. It was very much appreciated by Sam and the team down there. Lastly, I would just like to show something to members of there. You see this council carried a full motion last year, in fact, it was to really set our priorities and responsibilities for the environment. One of the key facets of that was actually banning helium balloons and sky lanterns across all our premises. So I was delighted yesterday when I walked past a major part of our land and I saw this sign up. First time just been put up. So I wanted just to show that tonight, just to show actually this is the council in action, and that is a very, very strong message to put that out, and that's gone right across now, all the being rolled out across all our land, across Rushcliffe, all our facilities. And I'm also very pleased that a lot of parish councils and town councils are also taking that up as well. And we'll see progress at the Town and Council Forum in September. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's my announcements.
Item 6 is could the Executive Manager make his announcements, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There were no announcements. So my star involved. Well done.
So we now move to the body of the agenda today. That's the Statement of Accounts. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that's them. I think you've all had this. Hope you've all studied it and read it. Now I'm going to praise it very quickly. I'm pleased to present to full council the 2017-18 Statement of Accounts for your approval. The financial statements have been reviewed by the Corporate Governance Group and reported on by council's external auditors, who are KPMG. As with the past few years, there have been no significant issues have been identified in what is both a complex document, and I'm sure you'll agree, those of you who have read it, it's a complex document, and also a complex process of putting it together, which with tighter statutory deadlines. That is why this council has been brought forward earlier. It's usually in September. The statutory deadlines were brought forward. And it's also at a time when the council embraces a wide range of opportunities which can create accounting challenges. I think that's accounting, a few accounting words there that were put to me. In other words, how do we find this money? Pleasingly, the auditors have approved our accounts and confirmed also that the council has proper arrangements in place to secure value for money. I would also point out that within the Statement of Accounts, Section B, pages 28 to 39, is the annual governance statement which has been agreed by the leader and the chief executive. As well as approving the Statement of Accounts, the letter of management representation, this confirms the council is satisfied as to the validity of the financial statements, is to be signed by both the Mayor, Councillor Maureen Stockwood, and the Councillor Section 151 Officer Peter Linfield. There is an amendment on this, which is on page 30, where the date for the corporate governance meeting was the 24th of July, not the 17th, and the letter will be altered to reflect this. The headlines for the council are summarised in the narrative statement from page 14. The purpose of this section is to relate operational performance to financial performance, linking risks and opportunities the council faces. Regarding council performance, it has been another extremely successful year for Rushcliffe. We continue to keep our council tax low. We control our revenue and capital expenditure, and we deliver quality services to local people, as well as delivering and facilitating growth in the borough, the epitome of an excellent council. Now, moving on to our financial position. As previously reported to Cabinet a couple of weeks ago, our earmarked reserves have increased by 317,000 to 10.5 million. Our reserves are important given significant uncertainty and financial risks the council faces going forward. These are principally the National Review of Business Rates and fairer funding. That is, fairer funding, for those who are not aware, is the sharing of financial resources within the sector. During Cabinet, we did commit to utilising reserves towards our growth agenda. And for example, we invested in the Tour of Britain, demonstrating our commitment to improving the quality of life across the borough. As we have said many times before, Rushcliffe looks to attract business and is indeed open for business, with the emphasis on growth, growing our economy, our businesses, our leisure facilities, our housing and our people. The ongoing strength of our reserves puts us in a position to both withstand future financial shocks and enables us to invest in initiatives to benefit the whole of the borough. Some of the biggest financial issues and complexity in terms of the accounts concern our capital expenditure and financing. There is commentary on the year-end capital underspend position on page 21 and that amounts to 12.7 million. This happens most years and is due to expected some slippage and rephasing, but I can reassure you this money will be spent on the relevant projects that it has been put forward for. The chart on page 21 shows, well, best part of 6 million on non-operational investment property as a result of the council's ambition concerning its asset investment strategy. This strategy includes 15 industrial units at Bingham, an industrial property at Barden near Colville, and an office and warehouse at Finch Close, Lenton Lane, Nottingham. Impressively, these properties should generate around £280,000 in income each year. Put that into perspective, That's equivalent to just over £5 on council tax. Our commitment to developing assets, creating jobs and improving the environment across the borough is also demonstrated by our continued investment in Cotgrave, with 1.16 money of the, it's in there, it's called assets under construction, being spent on developing the multi-service centre, shops and the industrial units. Pages 23 and 24 of the report focus on the main challenges and opportunities the council faces, some of which I have already mentioned in discussing our reserves position and future funding concerns. Going forward, funding future leisure provisions and delivering the borough's housing requirements will not be easy, but I'm confident we will deliver our objectives with the continuing evolution of the transformation programme. Now, members will be aware, I know it's been raised in a lot of meetings, that pensions remain a challenge. I'll draw your attention to page 26 and the graph which shows the general downward trend in the council's net worth. However, this year there has been a slight change. There is a reduction in pension liability of 5 million. It's a technical matter. It's to do with interest rates and longevity, and therefore there's been a corresponding rise in the council's net worth in last year. It's important to note pensions remain a national problem as people live longer, number of employees contributing to pension funds reduce, and uncertainty in the financial markets prevail. I would add that the County Council administer the fund and KPMG separately audit it using specialist actuarial advice. Ultimately, it's a national pension scheme and requires national solutions, with it being subject to statute. I said this last year and I'll say it again. It's my belief that this council continues to deliver excellent value for money for its residents. This is both reflected in the financial statement and the auditor's reports presented to the corporate governance group. I'm extremely pleased to recommend these accounts. It's an excellent document, and I'm sure everybody appreciates the amount of hard work that's gone into it. It's been carried out primarily by Peter Linfield and Sarah Whittaker over there in the corner, and the finance teams, in not only bringing forward a set of accurate accounts, but also having a clean bill of health from the auditors, and also having to produce them a month early. Therefore, Madam Mayor, I'm very happy to support the recommendation that's detailed in the papers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robinson, second.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think these accounts, obviously these are financial reflections of the authority, but if you look at page 17, I think it probably gives the best insight into where this council is at the moment, and this is by the Independent Corporate Peer Challenge Group, and I quote, that Rushcliffe is an organisation that has commercialism in its DNA, leading to multiple and diverse positive outcomes. I think that really sums up, as Councillor Moore has talked very eloquently about there, about the very, very positive outcomes that this council is producing for its residents, for its businesses, indeed for everybody. In terms of growth, some excellent examples is, as obviously as we've talked about with Cotgrave, now the 100% of units are let there now, and 230 houses are being completed over there. And of course now we're moving on with a lot of focus and investment in the likes of Bingham, Newton, and very shortly Fair and Pastures as well. And we've taken advantage of growth deal funding and housing infrastructure fund. So this has been funds we've got through the LEP, through the various government bodies, to make sure that Rushcliffe, as Councillor Moore said, is open for business, and it's attracting substantial monies into this authority. In terms of the accounts, one of the advice that we use is the growth boards. And I'm delighted now these growth boards we set up a couple of years ago are now really moving into delivery mode. And we look at West Bridgford, for example, which had the Commissioner's report. We're now moving ahead with that. And very recently we set up the East Leek growth board as well, reflecting, of course, the DNRC that we discussed earlier and the very, very big opportunities that it offers this authority. The council investment strategy now is mature and it's producing very serious returns. And in fact, next year we will be grossing around £1.7 million worth of investment income. 1.7 million. It's a huge amount of money and making a real difference to the residents of Rushcliffe as we move forward. These accounts aren't just about numbers, they're also about quality of life. And within there, it talks about satisfied customers, i.e. our residents. 92.8% of our satisfied customers with our leisure facilities. One of the highest of any council anywhere. And indeed, when we look at this very building, car parking aside, but I'm delighted we've got a full car park, so I'd be quite embarrassed standing there in front of you having spent 15 million with an empty car park. But what a fantastic reflection on this authority about the customers that come in, members, staff and everything. This is part of this council's strategy actually delivering. But of course, what's very important, as I've highlighted in numerous years in my role in the business and the finance, is that we are in a transformational time. And we do have serious challenges ahead of us. We have to use this word called Brexit. We have to talk and realise that there are going to be serious financial challenges ahead. But I'm delighted. I think we are incredibly well placed. It is of no coincidence I have two very big awards in front of me here. The MJ Award, the LGC Awards. National awards given for the performance of this council, for its members and its staff as well, at the highest stage councils can possibly get. LGC Award there for the commercialism, the MJ Awards for entrepreneurial spirit. And what these actually mean and transform to is us producing value for money for our taxpayers, for the residents, and as I've said, actually delivering the very, very best for Rushcliffe. And indeed, as Councillor Moore said, that these are excellent accounts. The awards are just part of it. But actually, for me, what's more important is the quality of life as a resident of Rushcliffe. And I think it's absolutely key that we are delivering the very, very best for all these residents. And I'm very happy to second these accounts. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McInnes, would you like to?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And thank you for that tribute to Hilary Morrissey. It's very good of you, because we didn't get much notice about that.
No.
Please don't take this off my 5 minutes, will you? Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, all members will be well aware of the challenges and difficulties experienced throughout the financial year. Briefly, these include uncertainty around what to expect from the introduction of a 100% business rate retention and fair funding, the ending of the 4-year settlement and the spending review, which is due to expire in 2020, ongoing and significant cuts to new homes bonus and the rate support grant, upfront lump sum payments, which is reference has been made to the staff pension scheme, the financing, which hasn't been, the finances of an increase in pay for staff, the first and very welcome real pay increase for over 6 years, and setting aside a sum of £1.2 million to protect ourselves against the business rates appeal. Despite these uncertainties, cuts and provisions, the finance team have been able to produce a balanced budget, maintain the general fund at 2.6 million and increase the reserves by 317,000, with earmarked reserves now standing at over 10.5 billion. This has been achieved by delivering on service efficiency savings, increasing revenue income generated by our loans and investments. Furthermore, this has been brought about without a noticeable reduction in services or adverse comments from taxpayers or local people. Madam Mayor, a tremendous endorsement of the finance team's competence and commitment. Although it's been a difficult year, we have emerged from it in a relatively strong financial position and well placed to withstand our the financial challenges ahead without having to reduce quality of service quality of support for our capital programme. Furthermore, strong enough to take the opportunity to part address the acute shortage of affordable homes across the borough, an issue we urgently need to tackle. Madam Mayor, as well as scrutinising the statements of accounts, the Corporate Governance Group also considers and comments on the External Auditor's Report, which is presented to 2 members by the accountants KMPG at that meeting. This was the last presentation by KMPG as their 5-year contract has expired, And in the future, the newly appointed accountants, Mazars, I'm not sure that's the right pronunciation, take over the responsibility for the next 5 years. Yet again, it was a first-rate report that the officers and members can be pleased. The auditors reported they were completely satisfied with the accounts and had been impressed by the level of openness and assistance from officers of the team. Furthermore, they complimented the team on the speed with which the accounts had been delivered. In prior years, the authority was required to prepare a draft financial statement by the 30th of June and then finally signed accounts by 30th of September. However, the revised deadlines now apply, which required draft accounts to be in by the 31st of May and the final signed accounts by the 31st of July. Madam Mayor, we support the recommendation and wish to take this opportunity to thank Peter Linfield and his team for the continued hard work, commitment and success. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Mayor. Getting my sexes mixed up, or genders better.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very briefly, to effectively repeat or not to repeat, but to endorse what Councillor McInnes has said, and Leader and Councillor Moore, I'd particularly like to thank Peter Linfield and his team for doing this job, as has been indicated, in record time, as they had to this year because of the changing timescale that was forced upon them. I was also very impressed at the corporate governance meeting earlier this week, how well they and also the auditors were able to answer a series of sometimes quite searching questions from members of the CGG to show that there is strength in depth in this report, and that in fact this does fairly represent the state of this borough's finances, which are excellent. And I would just once again say thank you very much indeed to the team for producing this, and well done to all of you. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Moore, would you like? Sorry, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks also to the officers for your work in dealing with the complexity of the accounts, and congratulations to all the officers in producing the many initiatives which the leader has described. I don't fully understand the juggling which goes on with the capital in the accounts. I do understand, as described in there, that the council, amongst its other things, secured 9.95 million on the housing infrastructure grant for Clifton Pastures roadworks, and I strongly hope that the estate will now provide the 30% affordable homes and not the miserable 10% that they offered before the road costs were offset. KPMG makes some very reassuring comments on our pension provision. They grievously failed the audits of Carillion and its pension provision, so I'm particularly pleased that the council is changing to another auditor. There must be doubts about the long term on the pension, because there are clearly pension costs of former staff funded by a smaller pool of staff, and also if Councillor Cutts thinks her unitary proposals imposed on her loyal county councillors will save running costs, then maybe she's not looking at the future pension costs of such changes. Amongst the risks ahead, obviously, there's potential borrowing costs of the much needed replacement for the leisure centre at Bingham and the end of the Ratcliffe Power Station, which has often been mentioned. Madam Mayor, I trust we will ensure a complete decommissioning of that site, unlike what has happened elsewhere, the site clearance, and that we manage to attract alternative users of the site. And I hope that all councillors will be briefed on developments there. I'm very pleased to support that we will support the report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. No further speakers have indicated. Councillor Moore, would you like to respond?
No, Madam Mayor, nothing really. I think just thank everybody for their support, and we note the points that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation is on page 9 of your agenda. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous?
I think it's unanimous.
Yes, that is unanimous.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 9, is notices of motion. First motion to be put by Councillor Jones.
Madam Mayor, the motion is in front of you that we call on Nottinghamshire County Council to create a street parking strategy with West Bridgford in cooperation with this council, which improves opportunities for residents and the livelihood of local businesses. In the central areas of West Bridgford, there are a fair number of large and not so large older family houses with no ability to park other than on the road. This is the situation in some roads near the town centre and also further afield. Certainly there are serious problems on roads which lead off Melton Road and Musters Road. To my knowledge, they include South, Charworth and North Roads, Clumber, Portland, Manvers, Carnarvon, Highland, Highfield, Byron, Exchange, Henry, George, Patrick, William, Epperson Road and others. The reality is that whether we like it or not, most households have one car or more, like most councillors. What does our marvellous County Council Highways say about new planning applications in West Bridgford? It is a sustainable location, and if no parking space is provided in the application, no parking space is required. Just think about it. County Hall is perhaps the most sustainable of all locations. It is served by numerous bus routes. It can be reached by footpaths and cycleways. It can even be reached by the river. No one lives there. By its own logic, it does not need a car park. The result of the highway's lack of requirements for parking provision on applications in the heart of West Bridgford is that some residents cannot find a parking space within walking distance. Some roads end up overnight with cars double parked on one side and single opposite. This is an ongoing reality. It is not the result of the periodic extra aggravation caused more widely by major sporting football and cricket events. The other impact, which is serious, is on the many valuable community groups which use church halls and other group huts in the daytime and in the evenings. These are used by residents from West Bridgford but also wider afield. Most of these groups rely on on-road parking. These range from memory cafes for dementia, those sort of groups, through to guides and scouts and many others. Most of the church halls were built in the days before the population grew and cars became the norm. Most have no parking spaces or just 2 or 3 at the most. The County Council's approach to what is now at breaking point is to introduce more resident permits. Parking permits moves the problem to other roads. The most recent parking permit is soon to be implemented on George, Epperson and Patrick roads. Even before the resident permit starts, the lack of on-road parking is already resulting in reducing the number of community groups meeting at the Methodist Church Hall. After the permit scheme, it is expected that some groups will struggle further. The same parking problem occurs around the Baptist Church community rooms. Adding insult to injury, County Highways continue to not object when planning applications in the same area provide no parking spaces, again saying it is sustainable. On Melton Road, several flats were approved without any parking spaces, again with the County Council saying it is okay because it is a sustainable location. In practice, new residents of those flats may park overnight in the spaces opposite on Melton Road shops, which in turn impacts on local businesses by reducing the opportunity to shop there. Even when a planning application for flats on Lower Musters Road provided one parking space for just 50% of the flats, the same approach was used. No objection, sustainable. No, it isn't. It's a log jam. There are 2 busy GP surgeries there, a health clinic, a mental health service, and a Methodist community hall nearby. Of course, this council is looking at options for parking on the existing car parks we own in the town centre. Hopefully, any viable option will increase and not decrease spaces. There may be other opportunities for the council to increase parking areas rather wider. Madam Mayor, we have a problem. We all know that many occupants will have a car, and with the current trajectory, parking will become more and more intolerable in those streets in West Bridgford. We need the County Council to change tack on planning applications where there's no parking space or only partial parking spaces provided in the application. I hope that all councillors do not want to see community events reduce, venues decline and community activities fall, and that you will support this motion. This is why I hope that the two councils can discuss this problem and propose changes which improve the situation or at least reduce its further deterioration. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Khan, are you seconding the motion?
I second the motion and reserve the right to speak, Madam Chair.
Councillor Edivine.
Madam Mayor, having listened to Councillor Jones, and broadly we support some of the issues with parking in West Bridgford, I would like to propose an amendment to his motion. And the amendment, which you can see on your screens, is that once issues relating to street parking are identified, we will seek to work with Nottinghamshire County Council and for the county to create a street parking strategy for West Bridgford which improves opportunities for residents and the livelihoods of local businesses. As I said, we do broadly support the motion proposed by Councillor Jones as a motion, and we've always had at the heart of our strategy delivering outcomes that improve the lives of our residents, be they residents of West Bridgford or other parts of the borough visiting West Bridgford. We've already announced plans to improve off-street parking through the potential redevelopment of Bridgford Road car park. And of course the County Council are responsible for on-street parking. This amendment seeks to further clarify what we as representatives of Rushcliffe residents want from street parking in Bridgford. Before we go to the County Council, we want to find out what it is that we as a borough want, and that will enable us to approach the County Council with our desired outcomes for something which they are ultimately responsible for. We therefore see this amendment as an improvement to the original motion, and I ask that you all support the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'd like to second that motion, and I reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Donoghue. The amendment is debated first. Councillor Jones, do you wish to?
Madam Mayor, I would not be accepting that because I think those issues are already identified as I described. That feels like it's putting it off. So that's why I'm concerned about that. I hope people understand that there are issues already. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other speakers? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Jones just made the comment that he's adequately expounded the reasons for his motion. However, they're not recorded in the motion. And that's why this amendment is appropriate, because that seeks to ensure that we can actually properly identify the issues before going to the County Council. His motion as tabled suggests that, well, we go along to the County Council and say we've got a problem with street parking. And they say, well, what exactly is the problem with street parking? Oh, well, I talked about it in the council chamber when I moved the motion. Well, where is it recorded actually in the motion? So this amendment is designed to be helpful, actually, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Jones, to strengthen it, to ensure that the issues are properly identified before the County Council is approached. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McInnes, did you speak to the amendment?
Just briefly, as the council and along with Councillor Plant, on the council of the Trent Bridge ward, we'll probably spend, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a week dealing with planning applications on houses in multiple occupation. For example, the Talbot Hotel is going to turn in, if it gets planning permission, to a HIMO with places for 21 people. If you've got 21 people with 21 cars, I've no idea where they're going to go. They're certainly not going to get in around there even now. There was a number on Musters Roads of large Victorian houses turning into and old people's homes being turned into flats with probably between 15 and 18 flats with 6 car park spaces. This goes on and on. But just to actually make my point is that really the only solution is not having so many people, not having so many cars. And I wonder if I could have a quick show of hands in the meeting of how many people here have got 2 cars in their family. Show of hands, just to show what the degree of what the problem is.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I don't think that's appropriate to start taking things like that. Some people might want to keep it secret.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The important thing here, we're actually agreeing. We have issues in West Bridgford. What Councillor McInnes has talked about and Councillor Jones, I get emails, letters all the time. Now, I've got to be careful here because we do have a planning committee and we work on the planning legislation. So I'm not going to say it's right or wrong in terms of any application that you talked about. But what Councillor Clark said is it is important we capture those recorded and we approach the county council formally going forward what these issues are to ensure that they are in front of them properly put down so they respond. And I can assure you as leader we'll make sure this is progressed. I'd be very happy that this is brought back, whether it be full council or whether it goes to one of the scrutiny committees, or however it goes, that we actually forward this. Can I also remind, we also have the West Bridgford Growth Board as well. And that is fundamental to the growth of West Bridgford. But just to go to the county council and say, do a strategy for us and we'll wait for it to come back. I think it's really important that Rushcliffe take the lead. Exactly, Councillor Jones, you put your input into there. We probably should have workshops to make sure it's done correctly and then we can put that forward. Because I think everybody in this chamber is agreeing with you. And that's why I think this motion that we've put forward captures an awful lot better. It's a much better process and I think personally it'll be welcomed by the County Council.
Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and congratulations on your first meeting, and it's all going very well, despite being treated like children. Yeah, I was going to say I wanted Councillor McKinney to ask people how many people do not have any car in their households. The problem of parking is across the parts of West Bridgford where the houses are older. So even those that do have little drives and garages, cars now, I think another problem is that they're so big. Cars have increased so much in size that what a little Mini in the old days compared to a Mini now is very different. So there's even people who have garages and drives, but you can't fit a car on them in these days. And there are many problems other than the ones. I'm just going to add a few more problems. One of them is that with residence parking, where it has been introduced, there was a time a while ago where people were asked, do you want to have residence parking? And the vote was actually once they discovered they had to pay for it and that it didn't magically create extra car parking spaces on the street. They suddenly went off the idea. And interestingly, a street that already had residence parking asked whether it could be taken away from them because they were permits were given out to people with four cars in an HMO, but there weren't 4 parking spaces outside that building, so it doesn't help really. And also, even where people have created space in front of their house by removing their front garden and removing their Bullwall stone wall, and if you add that up, that is an incredible loss of green space and space that allows water to go through, should we ever have any more water. So, you know, you can actually get a flooding problem because of that loss of green space. It doesn't create any more car parking spaces because the area in front of them has to be kept free for access. But I think we should also look upon some ideas, as well as just perhaps suggesting to the county council that we perhaps need to look to think a bit laterally on this. So it's not just saying you mustn't suggest that we have planning applications passed that don't have at least one car parking space per household. What we could say is you can have that, but the people who move into that building agree not to have a car, or they have carpooling with an electric charging point that they share. And we need to make much, much better provision for cycling, especially during the Tour of Britain that we're all supporting. I've cycled here tonight. It's still not pleasant coming here along that side road and trying to get into the right place because of that fence that's built up at the side. So there's still problems even in this council and this building and this car park, not for drivers but for cyclists and people walking. So that's what we need to do. We need to encourage more cycling, more walking, more use of public transport, and we will indeed then perhaps get what Councillor McInnes wants, which is that we have fewer cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I were a cynic, far be it from me to say that, one might say that this is an exercise in kicking the can down the road, i.e. slowing the process up. I think it is necessary, if this, as I suspect it will be, if this amendment is passed, then there needs to be a definite commitment to a short timescale, and I'm talking by the end of the year at the very latest, for us to be able to carry out this process. Because otherwise we can say, oh, we haven't actually done that yet, or we haven't quite sorted it out yet, we have to wait a bit longer. That's not going to be good enough. We need to have a definite commitment that this is going to be done, and it's going to be done very soon, because otherwise, what's the point? The situation will have got so much worse before you even get to start it. So without that, I'm not, don't feel able to support the amendment unless there is a definite commitment to a short timescale before these issues are identified, so that this process can proceed. Thank you.
Councillor Khan, you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I listened to Councillor Clark and Councillor Robinson, and I'm persuaded that we can support the motion, support the amendments. I have.
Mr. McInnes, can you put your microphone off, please? Yeah.
So further delay in getting this amendment in place. Madam Mayor, what I was saying was that after listening to Councillor Clark and Councillor Robinson, I am prepared to support the amendment with a couple of provisions. First is that I wonder if the leader will consider that once the strategy is developed in conjunction with the County Council, this is then reviewed and discussed at the Strategic Growth Board, because that has representation from both the Borough Council and the County Council. The other, and I wonder if you would also consider including in this review car parking charges, because we see alarming headlines, Madam Mayor, where councils are urged to reduce parking charges to prevent towns becoming ghost towns. And it's, we recently saw a heading in Doncaster which said the high parking charges are killing off the town centre in Doncaster. So I would suggest to the leader that a couple of these things can be considered, and I'll be very happy to support this amendment.
Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to echo what obviously Councillor Davison said, really, in terms of there needs to be obviously a commitment and a timeline to this. I think Councillor Robinson did mention the word workshops, which I think is a pretty good idea. But I have a feeling that the issues that will be raised there will probably be very much the same that what we've heard from Councillor Jones. Sorry. Yes. One thing that I thought was interesting, I was looking at the recently produced off-street parking strategy, where Councillor Mason stated in the introduction, car parking is a complex and emotive area, and that is so true. And obviously we can see that in what's been actually said in the chamber this evening. But the point, my point in terms of being obviously on the county and on the borough, is that, you know, off-street parking and on-street parking, you can't really look at the two separately. I mean, they both add to the other problems. And wash my mouth with soap and water, but that is probably one positive of a unitary authority. But don't quote me on that. But do not quote that. But it, you know, we cannot look at them separately. So I really, you know, I welcome. I hope that this amendment is passed and that we really do move forward with this issue together, because we have to look at it together in the best interest of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Let's see.
I do appreciate that this motion started as being about West Bridgford. But I just wanted to make the point that the problems which are being referred to actually occur in the 60% of the borough that is not West Bridgford. And all I want to do is to ask that when you put this problem to the county council, you ask them to produce a strategy or a programme or something which will apply to all of the borough and not merely West Bridgford.
Councillor Eddie Vean, as a mover of the amended motion, would you like to respond to issues raised in the debate?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say that Councillor Clark and Councillor Robinson did summarise perfectly our commitment to moving this forward, and I'm pleased that Councillor Khan also indicated that he was prepared to accept the amendment based on our desire to, we're not sweeping this under the carpet, we're not pushing it away, we want to get something done. We've mentioned workshops, we've also mentioned the Growth Board, and of course the West Bridgford Growth Board does have representatives as well from both the county and ourselves, and representatives from West Bridgford. So there are vehicles to do it, and Councillor Robinson, as the leader, has said that he is committed to making sure that this is debated. And Councillor Clark made the point that by having those workshops, that is where you get it recorded. I don't disagree with Councillor Jones' arguments, but there must be some way of going forward. We saw this as an improvement simply because it was actually giving us a, if you like, action first before we went with our arguments to the County Council and looked for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cotty, have you a point of order?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm declared an interest on this item, and the reason is that I am the Chairman of Communities and Place Committee at Nottinghamshire County Council, and I will be abstaining in the vote, and I would like that to be recorded, please, that I will be abstaining. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, would you like to respond to issues raised in the debate?
No, as long as we have the commitment to a quick timescale, as Councillor Davison had requested, and I think is implicit from the answers across the way, and I really appreciate that Councillor Cotty is here to listen. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Eddie Vean, do you want to respond to that particular point about time? Yes. No. No, right, okay, thank you. Well, it's time to put the amendment, the amendment to the motion to be put to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please show.
It looks like everyone.
Is that unanimous? There's one abstention. Right. Any against? Thank you. Any abstentions? That is recorded. Thank you. So the amendment's been accepted. So Councillor Eddie Vian is now the owner of the motion. It becomes a substantive motion. Yeah. Are there any further speakers to that? This is a change in the constitution that occurred. Any further debate, please? No? Thank you. Right, we will take the vote on the, which is now this substantive motion. All those in favour, please show. Q. Anyone against? Abstention? Thank you. So that is carried. So the second notice of motion to be put to the council by Councillor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This motion that I propose tonight is this council fully supports the rights of free speech, including the right of any political party to present their message on the streets of Rushcliffe, provided it is in full compliance with the laws and bylaws. However, this council commits to ensuring local community events organised by Rushcliffe Borough Council are organised to support the objectives of the authority, and that unless expressly authorised, there will be, number one, no organised political group presence to promote, campaign or recruit to a particular ideology or campaign. And number two, no facilities sanctioned to display political material, banners or leaflets. Madam Mayor, this is not a motion that either myself or my group actually wanted to discuss or put forward tonight. It wasn't in our plans, and to be honest, we didn't have a great appetite for it. Because quite simply, there's always been guidelines about politicising events under the Local Government Act, but I think it was important to crystallise what those guidelines are. And of course, what happened a few weeks ago, unfortunately, has prompted for us to bring this motion tonight to get clarity actually as we move forward. Now, on the 7th of July, Young Market, the food fair, I think it's well documented that the political party did decide to take a presence at that, and despite advice given at the time and things, decided to continue their presence of political messages, including a loud hailer, of course under the guise of 70 years of the NHS, which personally I think is an insult to intelligence to say it wasn't a political stance. We have a by-election coming up on the 23rd of August. I think it is really important that we now set clarity of how we go forward. We have 5 formal community events around Bridgeford. Is it too much to ask political parties that we actually respect this council and its objectives of the people who are actually at that event without ideology and message being put? Is it too much to ask that people can attend to enjoy those events, whether it be young or old, without being bombarded with loud hailers, badges, ideology? Personally, I don't think it is. And what's equally as important, I don't think our staff welcome it either. We have such committed, professional, dedicated community staff who are out there providing the most wonderful service to our communities. Why should they be put in situations to police, to referee political parties trying to get their message over, taking ground? Actually, absolutely, totally unacceptable. And that is why this motion has been brought tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I would like to second the motion and will speak now. I believe that this motion fully encompasses what to expect at council events. I'm sure we all hope and agree on free speech. But I also believe as well in the freedom of our community's children, young adults and families to be able to enjoy a day or an afternoon at our events without hindrance, harassment or disruption or even megaphones. This motion supports the residents and make it clear what they can expect at all our events and also what they will not encounter again. As I was at the Taste of Rushcliffe on Central Avenue, I believe that respect should be given to those who were trying to perform, as was our young adults, both from this country and Europe. They were singing and playing on stage, playing instruments. I was there to talk and listen to them, not to promote ideology. I was there to support our young project. It is our project. And I was disappointed and frankly appalled at the behaviour of certain councillors. And if these situations and this motion actually stops these situations arising, it can only be a good thing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McInnes, you indicated that.
Thank you.
No, it's McInnes first.
Councillor Plant will speak.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the Labour Group fully supports the first paragraph of the motion. Rushcliffe Constituency Labour Party has for many years held stalls in different parts of the borough, always, as far as we know, in full compliance with laws and bylaws. The stall in West Bridgford is by far our most regular event. This stall has taken place on Central Avenue for over 30 years at different times of the year, and not just in the run-up to local and general elections. Leaflets have been distributed, and at times residents have been asked to sign petitions. Many residents have used the opportunity to raise local and national concerns with members and local councillors in attendance. The stall is organised by West Bridgford Labour Party's branch officers or officers of the Constituency Labour Party. The stall is on County Council land, the public highway. It does not obstruct the highway in any way, nor do Labour Party members. I've looked on the website for local bylaws that relate to the holding of the stall, but I haven't found any. However, if there are such bylaws, we would wish to be informed of them, as the Labour Party obviously wants to be entirely compliant with the appropriate laws and bylaws. In the 30 years the stall has been held in West Bridgford, most of which myself or our group leader would have been in attendance at, we have received no complaints about our stall, our activities or our members. The Labour Group cannot support the remainder of the motion. It lacks clarity, is open to misinterpretation and raises more questions than it answers. For example, number one, a clear definition and list of events organised by Rushcliffe Borough Council is needed. For instance, does that include the farmers' market? Number two, if an event organised by Rushcliffe Borough Council is held in West Bridgford, does that mean political stalls cannot be held in other parts of West Bridgford or in other parts of the borough at the same time? Number three, how will the decision made in this council chamber be publicised, as there are far more ideologies and political parties than are represented in this chamber? Number four, what is meant by the word facilities in the second point in the motion? And finally, are the actions outlined in the motion enforceable, and if so, by whom and on what grounds? I would also like to add that I can categorically say that there was no attempt by the Labour Party to deliberately hijack the Young Market and the Taste of Rushcliffe event. We were there to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the NHS. It was a national Labour Party event planned for that day, and it was celebrated on that day across the country. It happened to coincide with the council's event. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Madam Mayor, I think this is a storm in a teacup, and a number of people's pride are at stake. And I think a number of us probably see no cause for this to be an issue here. For the reasons that the existing motion is too imprecise and open to misinterpretation, it begs questions about who would apply for authorisation, what conditions are enforceable, would canvassers for shelter or animal rights or Brexit be a political group or an ideology or neither. It's just so open to misinterpretation. So trying to be constructive rather than say a plague on your houses, I've proposed this alternative motion, which I think you see up there, that this council fully supports the rights of free speech and expression as long as it is within the laws of the land, such as not inciting racial hatred. This includes the right of political parties to present their message on the pavements of Rushcliffe as long as they do not obstruct the highway. The council considers that it is not appropriate for organised public political campaigns to occur within or interfere with official community events organised by the council. The council accepts that political campaigns can occur in public locations which are nearby council community events as long as they are clearly separate and do not interfere with access to or egress from the community event, and do not interfere or intrude upon the community event by sound, lighting or other electronic means. Because personally the only thing I feel was perhaps a bit silly was use of a microphone, of a megaphone or whatever it was. But that's why I thought that was a lot tighter, because we're not getting into ideologies, and it's just an expression of a view rather than pretending it's something that is enforceable. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So are you moving that amendment?
Councillor Davidson wants to speak.
Yes. Have you a seconder?
That amendment to the motion.
Thank you. Have you a seconder? Councillor Davidson.
Madam Mayor, I will second this amendment, and I'm prepared to speak now. I think that one of the points, the other points that Councillor Plant made, are one of the reasons I couldn't support the original proposal, because it is so vague. It doesn't refer, I mean, a political ideology. I mean, that can be almost anything. It can be a charitable organisation. It could be anything. Also, it doesn't indicate a spatial limitation as to where this limitation should apply. So, as Councillor Plant said, does that mean that because there's an event in Central Avenue, you can't do something elsewhere in West Bridgford or in Bingham or in Keyworth or anywhere else? It doesn't say you can't. I mean, that is not spelled out here. It's far too vague, far too broad, and therefore it requires to be tightened up very significantly, and that's why I support the amendment which Councillor Jones has put forward, and I would urge everyone to support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also agree with what Councillor Davidson has just said in terms of the original motion being rather vague. I actually don't really like even the first sentence without the provision that Councillor Jones has put in. So it says, this council fully supports the right of free speech, including the right of any political party to present their message on the streets of Rushcliffe. Actually, there are some political parties that I wouldn't want to see, like the BNP or the old National Front and those kind of political parties. I don't want to see those people on the streets of Rushcliffe, and where they have been, I've been on the other side of the pavement with my placard. So I think that the addition that Councillor Jones has made to specify that this council fully supports the rights of free speech and expression as long as this is within the laws of the land, such as not inciting racial hatred. I think that is a very important addition. And I also agree that the first one is very vague. That, again, all the points that have just been made by Councillor Plant and Councillor Davidson mean that it's more, we need to have a more specific motion about this issue, not to have a rather vague one which you could interpret anyway and which could actually prevent free speech. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Khan.
Madam Mayor, no one known society anywhere has ever adopted standard of entirely absolute free speech. The freedom of speech, therefore, must have limits, and I have sympathy with Councillor Robinson's point of view that there must be boundaries. There must be occasions where free speech cannot be promoted or allowed. But the difficulty I have is the same which many people from this side have already elaborated upon, that if you're going to define boundaries, these must be precisely clarified. There should be clarity as far as what those limits and boundaries are. It's absolutely vital that this criteria is clearly stated, so this is not misunderstood and doesn't lead to any confusion. So I hope that the leader would consider this carefully, and we can certainly agree on putting limits on freedom of speech on certain occasions without any difficulty. But we need more clarity, and I hope that this is accepted.
Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking to the amendment. In some earlier comments, Councillor Robinson referred much earlier in the meeting to quality of life in Rushcliffe. And the quality of life has always been excellent in Rushcliffe, and that is why people want to come and live in Rushcliffe. And it's no accident that it is a great place to live. Strapline of the council, great place, etc. I realise it's very hard to believe, Madam Mayor, but I'm in my 4th decade as a councillor. It's not old. Car parking strategy. So I've seen an awful lot of council and political activity in the borough in the last 30 something years. And in the borough, we've always been very respectful of each other. Okay, you know, occasionally debates and discussions get heated, but essentially we agree to disagree, and there isn't any major animosity, I hope, or I don't believe. We just agree that we have different points of view and opinions. But there's a time and place for that, Madam Mayor, to have a disagreement. And sometimes there's a time and place to join together and not to expound your political opinions. And there are appropriate times, and there are appropriate times, Madam Mayor, where specific events are taking place, and Councillor Mason mentioned, you know, it's the Young project. There was the young people. It was a great event. I didn't attend it this year, unfortunately, but they are great events, and they were there as a borough event. And actually, in terms of having any other events that may or may not be considered competing, it was subject to a road closure, Madam Mayor. And a road closure means that the borough is actually in control of it. And therefore it's quite inappropriate to have another event, much as we all applaud the NHS, and great, 70 years, it wasn't an event about the NHS. It was an event about the young people of the borough. So we need to ensure that we have clear lines of acceptability. We need to be ensuring that we do protect those events. Now the amendment, the last part that refers to nearby council community events, as long as they are clearly separate and do not interfere with access to or egress from the community event, and do not interfere or intrude upon the community event. The comment was made, the question was put earlier to the original motion, who's going to police this? Who's going to control it? Well, this amendment,
who is going to decide whether something is interfering? Who is going to decide whether it's intruding? Who is going to, even if that decision is made, who's going to enforce it? And how? Because there is no parameter given as to what is interference, what is intrusion. A loud hailer to one person may be fantastic, to somebody else it's a complete and utter interference. So actually I don't agree that this amendment is making it clearer at all. It's actually introducing more vagueness, because how is it going to be policed? So therefore I can't support the amendment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Khan was a very, very renowned magistrate, and you will appreciate the law. And that when we look at law and it starts getting subjective, it becomes a major issue. And when you see words like interfere, intrude, it is incredibly subjective. And ultimately, who makes that decision? So you put a motion there criticising the original about vague and not enforceable, yet you put something up there which is so subjective, it is absolutely couldn't even start. How would officers start patrolling? Are you interfering? Are you intruding? Our original motion talks just about the event itself. It is absolutely clear. And to say things like, well, could I hold an event in Keyworth or something, quite frankly, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And to put things there, I mean, Councillor Mallender deciding who should actually be at it. Now, you might like the BNP, but I know other people might actually say that's free speech. They might not like the Green Party being there as well. Unfortunately, that is opinion. And Councillor Khan's absolutely right. We're not absolute free speech, and that's why it said in the original one about laws and bylaws, because there are laws in this country about what you can say, and it's not just about racial, it's about sexual orientation, various other things that are covered by law, hence why it's in there. But Councillor Clark said very, very well that this is absolutely, totally subjective, whereas what we've put in there on the original motion is very clear and is enforceable. So we can't possibly accept this motion. I am encouraged by the fact you believe there should be guidelines. I think that's a major step that we all understand. And I think as long as I've been a councillor, I think there's been a very, very high of quality, of understanding and respect for parties all round. And I think it's also very important about we all understand this thing about free speech as well. So I personally, we cannot support that amendment that's been put there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Jones made a point right at the beginning of his speech, which I have to say I agree with. I think this is a storm in a teacup. We've all struggled to get our point over to the populace as a whole. We have very limited, those of us who live in the countryside particularly, have very limited opportunities to make a political point. Because as a councillor, you're not actually supposed to be making a political point when you do things. And there is a temptation to take advantage of opportunities when they occur. For example, every year there's a big event in my ward that has something between 3,000 and 4,000 people turn up, and it would be a big opportunity for me to get a Conservative stall there and go all out selling what my opinion is of Brexit or whatever. But I've always resisted that temptation because I think it doesn't do me any good, and it don't think it would do the party any good if I was to do that. And it certainly wouldn't do the event any good if it got a reputation for having political parties fighting each other. And I think what we really need to be doing here is accepting that there has been an issue which, possibly unintentionally, I don't know, has offended some people. I personally cannot support Councillor Jones' motion because I agree some of the words are too emotive and so difficult to enforce. Personally, I have a problem with the official motion in that I want to know who's going to enforce it. And that's going to be a problem. It's relatively clear nobody should do this. But who's going to enforce it? What do we do if somebody comes along and just disobeys? So what I would like to see, I think, if it hasn't already been done, is this amendment thrown out. So I will not be supporting it. And then when we come to the main motion, I would like to see it referred to our new borough solicitor to see if something can be achieved that is enforceable but doesn't actually do any harm to the very, very important principle of freedom of speech. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor.
Councillor Donoghue.
Yes, thank you. As many of you know, I've been a nurse in the NHS for over 20 years. I've got a code of conduct, one of the few codes of conduct, that's 24 hours a day, whatever my situation. I've looked after everybody from different backgrounds, from different religions, from different political parties. I've worked hard in the NHS under the Labour government and under the Conservative government. And I was delighted that the Conservative government decided to celebrate the NHS. I was delighted that my friends and colleagues could be held up and appreciated. I was invited to a service at Westminster Abbey in London. I went to Asda, and NHS England gave me cups, they gave me cakes, they gave me biscuits and said, well done. And I'm absolutely disgusted that any political party would interrupt an event and hijack the glory of the people that work within the NHS. We look after everybody. We don't bring politics into it. And I think when the Borough Council organises an event, there's a boundary being stepped when you hijack it and use it as a political toy in playing field. I find it quite sad, and I wonder where the morals are when you have you're shouting slogans of Jeremy Corbyn and various other things. Where is the morality in that? Where is your boundaries? And how does that celebrate me and what I've done in the last 20 years of my life to look after people? So I feel sad, and I support the council because sometimes you can't predict what situation this will happen. And I would never have believed that members of the Borough Council would have taken part in this, because I would have believed that they represented the people that voted them in, their constituents that were happily there with their families for a day out. So I do want that recorded, and I do have to speak as a nurse in the NHS and put you right what a celebration is. So thank you.
Absolutely well said.
Councillor Jones wished to speak.
No, to repeat, it is a storm in a teacup, and I think some prides are at stake, and I think it's an unintentional collision of one event adjacent to another event. The reason I put that motion is it is about principles. The original motion is unenforceable. Nobody's going to be arrested. Nobody's going to. It's no more hard to apply than anything, which is why the motion that I've put to you is about the principles rather than the rather dogmatic approach which I fear the leader is going down. It is quite clear that the existing motion is almost seeking to establish the law of the land and the law of Rushcliffe, and it isn't. And I do not like such a dogmatic approach, which is why I'm suggesting that, which, yes, is no more enforceable than the other, but it is at least principles that are involved. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Khan, you wish to come back?
Madam Mayor, I wish to raise a point of order. The issue of enforceability has been raised by several people. several councillors. It's been raised by Councillor Clark and eloquently by Councillor Lawrence. And I wonder if we can have a response on this from the leader, and what the status is on enforceability of the motion which he has proposed.
I just have one more speaker that's indicated. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, briefly, I don't agree with colleagues who refer to it as being a storm in a teacup. It certainly wouldn't have been a storm in the teacup to staff and organisers of an event who were put out, no doubt upset and inconvenienced, and it wouldn't have been a storm in a teacup to members of the public who were there intending to enjoy an event, especially youngsters as well, who would have been planning and looking forward to this for a long time. So I really don't agree with that. It was, by all accounts, caused considerable upset. And very simply, who will enforce it? Well, we're referring to Rushcliffe Borough Council events here, so surely an organiser, a representative of the council officer, whoever it is there, will be in a position to enforce it. And that will simply be saying to whoever, sorry, please don't do this, whatever it is they're doing, respect the event. And I would have thought that's really quite straightforward and quite simple. But really, to reiterate, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, it is not a storm in a teacup. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hadn't intended to speak on this one, but to me, the motion put forward by Councillor Robinson is ever so straightforward. There are 5 events a year. Why can't we just behave ourselves? We're talking about enforcement. Why don't we enforce it ourselves? We're talking about policing it. Why don't we police it ourselves? Why don't we respect? The list will be given from the officers saying when these events are. All we are saying to you, or to anybody, is please don't wreck these events. 5 days in a year. That's 300 and, I don't know what my maths are, 360 odd days. I like to see the Labour Party stand on Central Avenue. It always gives me a laugh. I always have a bit of banter with whoever's on there. I'm pleased to see you and I love to debate with you. And I'll debate with the BNP. I hate them, but I'll debate with them because it's free speech. But all we're saying, all Councillor Robinson is saying, 5 events a year, why can't we police it ourselves? And for God's sake, why can't we behave on Rushcliffe Borough Council events? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, as the mover of the original motion, wish to respond.
Point of order,
Sorry,
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jones.
You asked, you invited Councillor Jones to speak. So I assume that was winding up on the motion, but then other people spoke after that. So surely we should be now voting on the amendment before we revert back to the original motion.
Yes. Are we going to?
Sorry.
Which one?
Councillor Jones now.
Right, Councillor Jones, as mover of the amended motion, to respond to issues raised in the debate. You've already done it, thank you. Right. Now it's Councillor.
Here we go. This is the constitution process for dealing with amendments and motions.
Yes, as you know, I have given notes. I have got it.
I just asked for a recorded vote.
Thank you. Did you note that? Right, it's now Councillor Robinson, as mover of the original motion, to respond to issues raised in the debate. That's what I have here.
No, we've done the amendments, we're moving on now.
Too much hijacking.
Yeah, it's okay.
I know.
We shouldn't invite people.
Yes. This is on the amendment, people.
I'm getting lost in
Okay, so I'm speaking on the original. I think, Councillor, I'm actually speaking on the original motion. So, just to be, I don't think it's good.
No.
Point of order. Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry to intervene, but we are debating the amendment, and the amendment has now been wound up because Councillor Jones has talked to the amendment again, and you must now take a vote on the amendment. If the vote is lost, it reverts back as the substantive motion, then Councillor Robinson will then talk to the substantive motion. If the amendment is won, that becomes a substantive motion, and Councillor Robinson can still talk to the substantive motion.
Go on, then.
Yeah, before we vote, it is actually my opportunity to actually speak as the mover of the original motion. So I'll just very, very quickly sum up and a couple of things. Councillor Plant said 30 years they have been in West Bridgford campaigning and canvassing. From my knowledge, there's never ever been an issue raised at this council, ever. And as Councillor Moore said, the Conservative Party will do the same. I'm sure the Green Party, everybody will. What we're asking is for Rushcliffe organised community events. So it is, they're published, they've got defined boundaries, you know exactly what they are. But ultimately, I think Councillor Moore's made the very big point. Why do you need them to be policed? Are we not mature councillors with standards, dignity, that we can accept, just keep away? Put your political things in your pocket for a day and come the next day, by all means. But these are very, very specific, defined events costing this authority, A, a lot of money, a lot of resource and a lot of time. And that is why I think it's really important we respect it. I really do. And I think the members of the public do as well. And I think you'd find it very hard to defend. Very hard. So I know that all of you have got a lot of dignity and standards in your own ways. And I'm sorry that this has been brought to this council, and it had to, though. I don't think it's a storm in the teacup because it needed clarity. It really did need clarity. Because there were some very, very poor responses from that last event. Very poor. That's what I need to say.
Thank you. Now is the time to put this amendment of the motion, to put it to the vote. So all those in favour of the amendment? Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. The leader just said he's been summing up. He's talking to the final motion.
The amendment. No, you have got to vote on the amendment. Then it becomes a substantive.
It wasn't changing the constitution. No? You read them out.
The amendment.
Some of us are used to a system where you take a vote of a show of hands, and then a recorded vote is called for, and then you have a recorded vote. So you actually vote twice on exactly the same thing. So we show of hands, and then we go to a recorded vote, and that will satisfy everyone.
Yes. I'm advised that that is acceptable, and the amendment's put to the vote then. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Against? Any abstentions this time? Right, we now have a recorded vote.
What's the amendment?
Sorry.
There were no apologies recorded for Councillor Richard Mallender. Now, he's actually at a meeting, and he was hoping, it's a very, very important meeting that's going on in Lady Bay this evening, and he was hoping but he was hoping to come here, and he didn't think he'd have to stay very long. But it's even worse than this one, apparently. So he unfortunately will have to stay there. And so please could his apologies be recorded so that when we get to the recorded vote, it will be that he's an apology. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that point of order. Want to read it out then?
Yes.
Oh. Sorry, we do not have a list.
Of what? Of the amendments?
The Sadiq to read them out.
Well, you can use this one.
Why can't we go through this one?
Yes, that should go with who's called to the meeting.
List of attendance.
That gives it alphabetically.
We don't mean
to recording, usually. Thank you, Councillors. Order. We are going to use the list that of those present. Well, yes, we have to.
Do we?
Yes. On a recorded vote. Or we can abstain. Thank you. We will proceed.
Okay, thank you. I think we're in a position to proceed now, so I shall read the list, and if the indication could be given whether it's a for or against, and I shall make a note. Councillor Stockwood. Oh, more. That's not there.
Sorry, it goes alphabetical.
Just go down there. Just go down this list.
Right.
Yeah.
Councillor Maureen Stockwood.
Abstain.
Councillor Christine Jeffries.
Abstain.
Councillor Reg Adair is absent. Apologies. Councillor Sarah Bailey. Councillor Kevin Beardsall. Councillor Andrew Brown. Councillor Martin Buckle. Councillor Brian Bushman. Councillor Richard Butler. Councillor Hayley Chewings. Councillor Tina Cumbleback. Councillor Barry Cooper. Councillor George Davidson. Councillor Neil Clark. Councillor John Cotty. Councillor Angela Dickinson. Councillor Juliette Donoghue. Councillor Martin Edwards. Councillor Andy Edivine. Councillor Jean Greenwood. Councillor Ron Hetherington, apologies. Councillor Sue Hall. Councillor Rob Inglis. Councillor Karar Khan. Councillor Rod Jones. Councillor Nigel Lawrence. Councillor John Lungley. Councillor Alistair McInnes. Councillor Marie Mayles. Councillor Richard Malinder is apologies. Councillor Sue Malinder. Councillor Debbie Mason. Councillor Gordon Moore. Councillor Alan Phillips. Councillor Liz Plant. Councillor Francis Perdue Horan. Councillor Simon Robinson. Councillor Mrs Jean Smith. Councillor John Stockwood. Councillor John Thurman. Councillor Roger Upton. Councillor Gordon Wheeler's apologies. And Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
Against.
So the vote has been recorded as 28 against, 9 for, and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. Therefore, the amendment is lost. Any further debate on this issue? Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to support the main motion because as Councillor Robinson was introducing the motion, it reminded me of the second Saturday in June, when actually this may have been the start of it, because Bingham Town Council had its town fair on that day, and the Labour Party were pitched up with a stall on that day too. However, there was no upset with staff on that day because the very polite members of the Bingham area kindly paid £30 to Bingham Town Council to have a stall on the marketplace. This town fair is full of local groups, local charities raising money. I was also on a local stall with a charity teddy bear tombola. In fact, I think it was for your charity, Madam Mayor, if I recall. Unfortunately, the Labour Party turned up with the usual political slogans on the stall, but the one thing they did not have, fortunately, on that day was a loud hailer. However, I don't know whether it was conveyed to those members on the stall, but it went down very badly, and comments were made to other stall holders that actually it wasn't appropriate for a community event organised by Bingham Town Council. And I was extremely disappointed, of course, on the day of the Young Fair and the Food Festival, that people rocked up on that day without properly booking through the channels. So I completely support this motion. It gives us a fair sense of direction without actually being completely over the top. And I hope we can pass this motion unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think an awful lot's been said. I haven't got an awful lot to add. I'd just like to compliment Councillor Donoghue. Very moving, I think, hearing from that. I hope it's resonated with a few people in this room. These events, as I say, are community events. They're about this authority showcasing what we do very best. We should not be debating politics involved with those. We simply should not. I will answer the thing about enforcement. Enforcement is done on a case-by-case basis, depending what it is. But just remember is that these events are held on Rushcliffe land. People can apply, as it says in the motion there, and they could be accepted or turned away. We do work under local government regulations. If one political party is there, it should be offered to every political party, for example. That is the law. But ultimately, as Councillor Moore said, we should be policing this within this room, not asking our officers and putting them in the most difficult positions, as you did on that 7th of July. Thank you.
Thank you. Ask for the vote now on the motion, please. Yes.
All those in favour?
All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Abstentions 2. So that motion is carried. Third notice of motion to be put to council is again by Councillor Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I now refer to the 2 awards in front of me. This council acknowledges and celebrates the incredible achievement of being double winners at 2 of the sector's most prestigious national awards. By winning both the LGC Entrepreneurial Council and the MGA Commercial Council of the Year awards, it reflects the tremendous work done by officers and members to generate new and innovative streams of income. These initiatives have thus enabled this borough to maintain the very best of frontline services and maintain Rushcliffe with the lowest council tax charge in Nottinghamshire. Councillor McInnes said something in his speech talking about the finances, where he said we haven't seen a drop in services. Very good point, Councillor McInnes. Despite the savings and everything else like that, I think it's a credible testament to this authority, this Conservative-run authority, that we have managed to maintain, in many ways, improved services. And this has now been recognised and reflected on the very, very highest stages in this country to achieve these awards. Now let me stress, Madam Mayor, that we didn't set out to achieve awards. We never sat in my office with the Cabinet and say, we've got to go for these awards, what we've got to do. They basically just recognise business as normal for Rushcliffe. And can I stress, we were the only borough council to win these awards outside of London. That is the incredible recognition that we have actually had. And being at their awards and going on the stage and making the speech, I think it was one of the proudest moments ever as a councillor I've ever had at Rushcliffe. But as I say, this is not about winning awards. They're very nice, and we're very proud of them. But as I said in this motion, this is about making sure that we deliver the very best value to our taxpayers. And the fact we have the lowest council tax anywhere in Nottinghamshire is an incredible testament and compliment to this authority. Also, the range of reasons for that is our transformation strategy, where we've been saving costs and doing things better. But the major contribution to that has been our investment income. As you saw in the accounts there now, we will generate next year nearly £1.8 million worth of investment income. 1.8 million. I go to other councils who are asking me, we are thinking of looking at investing and being commercial. How should we start? I've seriously been asked that by a number of districts in the last 6 months. We now lead the way in this country for investment income, for entrepreneurial spirit, for actually making decisions that make a massive difference to people's lives in Rushcliffe. Because without that 1.8 million, we'd be making some serious decisions. But under Councillor Clark as leader, under the previous cabinets, we sat there and we made big choices. This was not a council that was going to be cutting. It was going to be investing, increasing our services. And all around this borough are incredible testaments to that. From the employment units at Cotgrave, to the investment in Cotgrave Town Centre, to the U units that are going there in there, the investment in the land in there in Bingham, Bridgeford Hall, etc. But probably one of the best testaments is the actual building you're sitting in now. And I think that is just probably the best medal we can wear. of an incredible facility that we've offered. So I would ask everyone to support this motion, that we put it out in the press, that this is a council recognising its achievements. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eddie Vaughan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the motion proposed by Councillor Robinson. When I first became a councillor at Rushcliffe Borough Council, I was impressed at how clear the vision for the borough was and how it delivered that vision to residents. Through this vision, we have maintained the accolade of consistently being among the best places to live in the whole country. Having lived in many diverse places before settling in this area 30 years ago, I can say that maintaining this accolade is no mean feat. On taking on the cabinet responsibility just over a year ago, I started to see even more the fantastic work that this borough does to continually strive to deliver for its residents. What has always struck me is both the desire for our members to put residents first, but also to embrace commerciality and entrepreneurship. The Corporate Peer Challenge in January made the point that business is in the DNA of this council, and particularly with our officers, who have risen to the challenges that we as members have asked of them. The challenge is to think as a business, and it's been met with enthusiasm, creativity and sound governance. Having seen other councils perhaps setting out to win awards, I'm proud to say that this council sees these prestigious awards as a consequence of our mindset, so that the award itself, whilst important, is actually secondary. But it's a result of our desire to drive to deliver quality. Our achievements across many projects are recognised through these awards, and in Copgrave we've created the environment for investment, resulting in the delivery of new housing, new jobs and a revitalised town centre, delivering shops, offices and services to the residents. Once complete, our income from the town centre and industrial units is also going to generate £250,000 per annum, both a success for residents and a commercial success. Bridgeford Hall was another major project that revitalised an important historical building in the borough, delivering new and improved facilities to the heart of West Bridgeford, and turned what I would define as an institutionalised old building into a vibrant asset, generating an income of £120,000 every year. The council's success can be seen in these and many other projects, with more in the pipeline. Our aim is to continue delivering first-class services for our residents, whilst generating income from our assets to maintain value for money through our low council tax. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. What's his name? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, echoing the comments that Councillor Robinson and Councillor Henderson have already made, I mean, winning these awards is a testament to the work officers and councillors have put in to adapting and transforming this council over the last few years. We all know the challenges that we have faced as a council with a change to our financial position, and we have acted in a proactive manner to be more commercially minded. Being recognised nationally twice is a great achievement. I'd like to say the way our officers have taken the challenge to adapt to new ways of working in a positive, can-do manner has been exceptional, and I'm sure it's very much appreciated by all the councillors in the room tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, obviously the Labour Group supports the motion and really welcomes the opportunity to congratulate staff and members on winning both the LGC Entrepreneurial Council and the MJ Commercial Council of the Year awards. It's quite a mouthful to say that. And they are very impressive awards. I wonder whose mantelpiece they're going to go on. I know staff have worked very hard for many years to generate alternative income for the council, and that has helped to make Rushcliffe's obviously fiscally very sound, which is obviously what we are certainly in favour of. And we are pleased that this work has been recognised, and really we ask the question, what are you going to do next year? Follow that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Invest in loud-hailers.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Do you wish to add anything further? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to thank Councillor Plant and this recognition. And I think Councillor Edwin did actually rate very well in terms of incredible testaments for what this council has achieved. It was interesting on Sunday. I had a document brought to me to read, which was a political document from across the way, which actually said, and I quote, "Rushcliffe has done nothing for its residents." Hear it again? Rushcliffe has done nothing for its residents. So let's just recap. Number one place to live anywhere in the East Midlands. The highest quality of outputs from education, from social mobility. I'm really struggling to understand, because, by the way, we've done nothing for our residents at all. Absolutely shocking. And these were obviously given because we've done nothing at all. So, Madam Mayor, I am very pleased to support this motion as we go forward. Thank you.
We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Now move to questions under Standing Order number 11, Part 2. Councillor Jones, you've got questions first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question to Councillor Roger Upton is, in what way will residents of West Bridgford and their community services benefit from the proposed community infrastructure levy?
Councillor Upton.
Thank you for your question. If the community infrastructure levy, or SIL, is introduced, hopefully early next year, as West Bridgford and Edwalton are non-parished areas, in compliance with the regulations, the Borough Council will have to decide, in consultation, how to spend the SIL contributions from developments in these areas. I should, however, perhaps point out that the SIL regulations are not retrospective, and all sites with an existing or extant planning permission will not be liable for the SIL. The SIL regulations require that contributions must be spent on or support infrastructure in the area where the chargeable development takes place. And this must be done, and as the regulations say, in consultation with the local communities. The exact mechanisms for deciding how such contributions will be spent and how to engage with those local communities will be determined in the period between the SIL hopefully being approved next year and when it actually comes into force. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Jones?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Given that parish and town councils will receive, yes, the basic 15% from SIL monies, and 25% if they have a neighbourhood plan, and most other parts of the borough have a parish or town council, but West Bridgford has neither, so it cannot have a neighbourhood plan and presumably therefore cannot have the 25%. Isn't the proposed SIL discriminating against, or at least disadvantageous to the residents of West Bridgford? And can that be a remedy to that be considered? Thank you. I would just say quite briefly there that, as I said, the exact mechanisms for how we apply the contributions, I understand your point about no neighbourhood plan, parish or town councils, but those exact mechanisms are laid down by the regulations of the SIL, and we will look at that, as I say, in the period between the hopeful approval of the SIL and when the actual date comes into force. You're quite right, you haven't got the parish or the town councils there, but I think the points you make, I understand where you're coming from. I would suggest you put them in writing and then they will go. I mean, the consultation period is on at the moment, so if you put your points in writing, then the independent examiner will take these on board. But as I say, there are regulations to cover that.
Thank you. Councillor Plant, you have a question for Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. Does the leader agree with me that the leader of the county council's unseemly haste for unitary status for the county, without proper consultation and discussion with district and borough leaders and a proper business plan, is not in the interests of the residents of Rushcliffe, excuse me, and the county as a whole?
firstly, Councillor Plant, just to correct on your question, it says proper business plan. The business plan hasn't been done yet, so I'm not quite sure how you can actually say without a proper business plan, because as far as I know, the vote at the at the full council meeting at County Council was to actually create a business plan for later this year. Now, I refer also you to the motion that this full council passed in November, where we agreed as an authority to have dialogue with with all upper tier authorities, always representing the very, very best interests of Rushcliffe. Now, obviously, with the vote, I've actually written to Councillor Cutts, I've written to our MPs, I've also had a meeting with the Minister, stressing that there should be dialogue with the district councils, including Rushcliffe, in any shape that this business plan goes. I do add is that our focus at Rushcliffe is on growth and economic development for this borough. We should not be distracted. However, in discussions, we want the dialogue with the County Council and any other upper tier authority that wants to speak with us. Thank you.
You have a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Which one am I now? Yes. Furthermore, does the leader agree that historically the East Midlands region has not received its fair share of funding from the government, and that it is in the best interest of all county residents for the leader of the County Council to re-engage with the leaders of all Nottinghamshire's borough and district councils and work with them to lobby government for fairer funding in the region instead of attempting to redraw the council boundaries?
Well, I can say, Councillor Plant, that myself, districts and the County Council are making serious representations to the government. I talked about the LEP earlier, and we will continue to make those representations. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you all very much for attending.
She didn't speak on it at all. I made all these notes about that.
No.
She was.
What time is it?
Well done. Well, I think you need a drink, do you? What do you got?
I hardly drink anything. I hardly do anything. That's it, actually.